We're back. You are chatting with John P. Today, I'm going to be talking about 5 great watches that need more love and attention. Now, what I mean by this is that all of these watches that I'm about to talk about are actually pretty great watches, and they just don't get a lot of attention compared to other watches that have similar specs or even sometimes brand clout in the industry. So we're going to cover those watches, and I think they're all pretty great buys as well. But please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. And of course, you can check out delraywatch.com, where we just dropped prices on a bunch of very cool watches for you to take advantage of now that the market is kind of wavering back and forth. So it is here as well. Check it out, delraywatch.com. The first watch that I believe does not get enough attention and love is the Girard Perregaux Laureato Chronograph 42 millimeter size. Now there are several different variations of colors of this watch. Particularly, I think the blue one is probably the most attractive, or the panda style dial is also very attractive for those of you that like that dial and the colorway there. But the blue one is probably most comparable to the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak 41 chronograph, which is in very high demand currently. Depending on which version of that watch, you're going to spend $30,000 pre-owned, whereas with this Girard Perregaux Laureato chronograph, you're actually only going to be spending maybe between $8,000 and $11,000 pre-owned, sometimes a little bit less even, sometimes a little bit more, just depending on if you need all the trinkets, the box, the papers, and what have you. So in my mind, when we look at these two watches, similar size, similar functions, the brands have been around for almost the same amount of time compared to a lot newer brands that exist. Remember, Girard Perregaux is one of the longest running, consistently watch manufacturers from Switzerland ever. Some argue that even it belongs in the Holy Trinity, although some argue against that fact. But nonetheless, it's a very old, rich brand, and it just does not get the attention. And even their latest models, including this Laureato chronograph, does not either. The specs are similar. Once again, the brands are similar. They have similar offerings for the most part. I mean, there's some exceptions. GP, as we call Girard Perregaux, is starting to kind of delve more into the sports watch segment, which they did in the past and kind of went by the wayside. So I think we'll see this unfold. Prices on GP watches have gone up in the last few years. They've really been focusing, the Kering Group, on kind of that grassroots marketing. They've been sponsoring some Instagram profiles, things like that. So they're trying, but they're still hurting. And I think that the Laureato does deserve to get more attention because the quality and the finishing on the watch is actually very great. It's spec for spec, in my opinion, to the Audemars Piguet case finishing. It's got an in-house movement, so I don't really see the problem there. It's just a popularity issue. So I believe that GP, including this Laureato Chronograph 42, does need to get more love from watch collectors. Next on the list, we have vintage Movado El Primero chronograph watches. With Movado in recent times, and even the last decade and previously the last handful of decades, Movado has really turned into a fashion watch brand. Within the last year, the brand has tried to develop some Swiss watches and tried to kind of expand that segment, including Swiss automatic watches, though they've done so unsuccessfully, in my opinion. Maybe they made some sales, but they haven't really kind of gained the attention from watch geeks and collectors like they did originally, because Movado watches used to be based in Switzerland. They'd make high-end Swiss watches. They'd use El Primero movements, and when you look at these El Primero chronographs, including the watches like the Daytron, spec for spec, they're exactly the same, except for it says Movado instead of Zenith on the dial, as Zenith watches from those eras. So when you look at vintage Zenith chronographs, they've never been more in demand than today, but there's also Movado equivalents where everything is pretty much the same besides the brand name, but no one really wants the Movados. Now, I say no one, but I don't really mean that. It's more of a extremely less amount of people want the Movados. But the ones that do are generally attracted to them because they are much lower in terms of price. I mean, the people that know and the people that really kind of look into this and look at the specs and like to not only just try new things, but also try things and try watches that they kind of feel to be on par with other equivalents, they're going to notice that everything is the same, and people that want that good value vintage watch are attracted to the vintage Movado. So I do think that these deserve more attention, and like I said, they're roughly half price compared to the Zenith equivalents. So why not give it a shot if you don't need to have Zenith on the dial? And while, in my opinion, Zenith is a great brand, a great manufacturer, and the brand name certainly has more clout, we'll call it, or notoriety than Movado in the high-end watch segment, it's really the difference in brand recognition is not grossly different. You know, it's not like you're comparing a Rolex or an Audemars Piguet to a Movado. You know, it's Zenith, right? So great brand, great recognition, but the difference is not grossly different to where, you know, you should really be leaning on one brand name on the dial versus another. So that's my opinion on that one. Give that one some more love. Next, we have all of Nomos. Now, I know people out there are going to be shaking their head. What is John saying about Nomos? People love Nomos. Yes, that's true. People love Nomos. I love Nomos myself. To an extent, right? I can't say I have, you know, the greatest attraction to the brand. For various reasons, I think mostly production volume at this point in the way that they've marketed themselves more than the quality of their watches, because the quality is very high and their in-house calibers really did set them apart in that price segment compared to what they were doing before, which was they were, you know, using either stock movements when they first started or slightly modifying them. So, you know, especially with the start of their alpha movement, they really did kind of set themselves apart in that segment. Who else is up until this recent moment where a couple of other more attractively priced brands have started to develop in-house movements, but previously they were really the only ones that did that, and that's why many people do enjoy them. But why many people don't enjoy them is because it says Nomos on the dial. Now, as time goes on, Nomos is developing themselves into more of a luxury brand. They have had some arguably failed models, including the Lux and the Lambda collections in precious metals, which are great watches, but once again, it says Nomos on the dial, so you get them in the secondhand market for, I don't want to say pennies on the dollar, but 80% off compared to their retail price sometimes. So that's kind of a warning sign of a watch not necessarily doing too well in the market. But the brand's doing well, but it's not doing well with those that need to have a more prestigious brand on the dial, and that just comes into branding. Maybe that will be rectified as time goes on, but because of this, there is less demand than I think that there should be for the watches, because watch geeks, we all like to say, you know, the movement on this is spectacular, the movement on this watch is spectacular, the finish on this watch is spectacular, but then when it comes down to the brand, people will say, oh, well, I won't buy that watch because of the brand. You know, I sometimes I find that people are being a bit of a hypocrite when they say they only care about the movements, but then they don't buy the watch because of the brand on the dial. So, you know, I think if we can look past the brand not being around as long as some of the others that do in-house, you know, pretty well machined and manufactured and finished watches, I think that when we look at Nomos, there just needs to be a little bit more demand, and I think that will go up as time continues. But what do you think about Nomos watches? Leave it in the comments below. I would love to hear your opinion. And I will say, I have owned Nomos in the past. I don't currently, just because I'm kind of focusing my collecting in other categories, including vintage. And on my wrist today, I have a Rolex Oyster Perpetual vintage watch. I love these things. This is Oyster, actually it's an Oyster Precision. I correct myself. I had the other Oyster Perpetual laying on the desk. So I love this one. This one's in my collection, and I think these are also a really great value. Small size, so people don't like to put them in their collection because it's not a modern size, but I don't really care. It's still a pretty good watch. Going on to Parmigiani Fleurier. The specific model that I think deserves more love and attention is the Parmigiani Fleurier Kalpa. Now, this is a watch that is kind of tonneau shaped, but it's more unique than that. You know, it's a mixture of tonneau and rectangle, and of course it has those interesting lugs that kind of come out from the case. You'll see the picture here. It certainly has a very unique and interesting case design. And Parmigiani Fleurier, for those of you that are not familiar, is an actual very high-end manufacturer of watches. Now, most of their watches do use other movements that they do modify or sometimes heavily modify, including using a Vaucher movement, which they do modify and heavily design as well as decorate on top of these. So they do a really great job at kind of taking a stock movement, a high-end stock movement, but really making it their own, in my opinion. And for the longest time, they did use gold rotors, which is nice to have. And when you consider a watch that, you know, when I bought my Parmigiani Kalpa, I bought that thing for like $2,500. They've kind of come up a little bit because they have dried up in the second-hand market. They're producing less watches out there, and they've kind of moved away from the Kalpa line. But you can get a Parmigiani Fleurier Kalpa watch for anywhere between now $3,000 to $5,000. There's different styles, variations. You got a chronograph. We might have a chronograph here at Delray Watch still. But I think it's a really great value when we talk about movements that are in these watches, that are in watches that are 10, 15, sometimes 10, 15 times the price, but certainly a few times the price. And they really are very finely finished. When you hold one of these Parmigiani Fleurier Kalpa watches, you really do feel the difference in terms of quality compared to literally anything else that you would find at that $3,000 to $4,000 price point pre-owned. I mean, I hate to even say it because I know there's going to be some people that really get riled up about this, but it's Friday, right? Let's stir it up a bit. I would say, you know, a $3,000 to $4,000 pre-owned Parmigiani Kalpa is significantly higher in terms of quality than anything in that segment and just above when compared to something like a Rolex. So you got to be a watch geek, you got to be a watch savant, or someone that really enjoys those little nuances and the delicacies and the finishings on the movement compared to, you know, something that's just a well-known luxury brand. And I don't know where Parmigiani is going to go in the future. They're changing it up a little bit. They're going to more traditional case sizes, as well as some partnerships with other brands. We'll see what develops in the future. But I do think because of the quality of the watches, they just deserve more attention. And I don't know exactly what Parmigiani can do to gain more attention from watch geeks and collectors. I don't know. I think they need to understand what the market wants perhaps a little bit better. And maybe they just need to start throwing some blue dials into their watches. I think they maybe have one blue dial watch. It's in a smaller case size. So maybe throw some blue dial watches in there and make a sports watch that's 40 millimeters, and then they'll get more attention. But I think they need it nonetheless. What do you think about Parmigiani in the comments below? And lastly, we have Linde Werdelin. This is a watch brand that was released in 2002 by two friends that I believe met on a skiing trip. It's Morten Linde and Jørn Werdelin. Now, these guys were really kind of a perfect match in terms of business partners. One of them had the design background and the other one had all the kind of the business background. And so together they kind of, created this passion product called Linde Werdelin to make high quality, durable, rugged sports watches that you could use predominantly while doing something on mountains or diving. And that whole notion is really exhibited when you see that they had products for a while that you would clip onto the top of the watches. One would be an altimeter for when you're climbing mountains or skiing or something along those lines, and another one that would be a diving computer. Sure, it's kind of quirky, it's a little bit silly, right? Because why wouldn't you just use a diving computer? Why do you need to kind of clip it onto your, your analog watch? That is an argument, but nonetheless, it really showed that they were dedicated to those two areas of sporting and outdoors, and I really do appreciate that from a brand, especially a new brand, right? They haven't been out for, hundreds of years. They just started in 2002. But when we really look at their watches, even if you kind of want to say that, it's so similar to a Royal Oak, okay, that argument's been played out for so many different brands. Set that aside and just look at the watch. The cases really are constructed very, very well. If we think that Zinn watches make some very rugged, durable cases, this is Zinn on steroids, in my opinion, in terms of the case construction. These are thick watches. Sure, they do have some watches like the Spidolite, which is a little bit different from where they started out with their, I think it was the Biformeter and a few other model lines, which were really just basic, simple, rugged watches. So they've kind of tried different things over time, but still, even their most recent releases are extremely durable and rugged. Sure, they use some Otto movements and they've used Sellita and other off-the-shelf movements, but that's really not what they're about. They're really about that rugged, durable, interesting design, almost futuristic watch. And I think that when you look at their prices that they're trading at pre-owned, I mean, once again, pennies on the dollar. And I don't know too many brands that trade for pennies on the dollar, but are that high quality, but also unique and interesting. So it's something to consider. I think that the brand needs more attention just because the fact that their watches are, I don't want to say entirely undesirable, but pretty close to undesirable these days. I mean, we've had a few here at Del Rey Watch, and we've done okay with them, but the fact is we had to sell them extremely low compared to retail. And when you look at a watch, in my opinion, when I look at a watch that is extremely well made, it has two very passionate people behind the brand that are working tirelessly to produce a great product, it's a little bit sad to see kind of just how the market is responding to a product like that. But at the same time, these are great value pieces for someone to add to their collection. So even if, for example, you don't think the watch is worth the retail price, in my opinion, it doesn't even matter because you can get them pre-owned significantly less, and in my opinion, almost the sum of the parts of what the parts would have originally cost when they had to produce and manufacture them. So something to consider. But what do you all think? Do you have any other watches or watch brands that you think deserve more attention or more love from collectors? I would love to hear it in the comments below. Please do not forget the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. This has been John P. Ciao.